Document. Part 1 of the story. The alarm blared through the control room, sharp and unrelenting. Red lights flashed across the walls, casting an ominous glow over the faces of the crew. The message on the main screen was clear, yet impossible to believe. Human presence detected in Class 13 Forbidden Zone. The words repeated themselves as if to drive home the gravity of the situation. Commander Laura Hayes stood at the center of the chaos, her hands clasped behind her back. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, her expression calm but intense. She had seen many strange things during her time in space, but this was different. The Class 13 Forbidden Zone wasn't just another restricted area. It was a place shrouded in mystery and danger. Scientists had marked it off limits decades ago after discovering traces of an ancient alien civilization buried beneath its surface. The ruins held secrets that no one dared to uncover, not because they were sacred, but because they were unpredictable. Stories about the zone spoke of explorers who vanished without a trace, their last transmissions filled with static and screams. Laura turned to face her team. They were all watching her, waiting for orders. She knew she couldn't ignore the alert. If someone or something was inside the Forbidden Zone, it needed to be investigated immediately. This wasn't just protocol, it was survival. Whatever lay hidden in the zone, it had the potential to threaten every human outpost in the galaxy. "All right," Laura said, her voice steady and commanding. "We're going in." The decision sent a ripple of unease through the room. Everyone present knew the risks. No one who entered the Forbidden Zone ever came back the same, if they came back at all. But there was no room for hesitation. Laura selected 3 members of her crew to join her: Ryan Cole, Emily Dawson, and Daniel Carter. Each of them brought something vital to the mission. Ryan was an engineer with a knack for fixing anything mechanical, even under pressure. Emily was a xenobiologist whose curiosity often bordered on obsession, but her expertise was unmatched. Daniel, the pilot, had nerves of steel and could fly any ship out of even the tightest situations. As the 4 of them prepared to leave, the tension in the air was palpable. The others watched silently, some offering quiet words of encouragement, others simply nodding in respect. Laura didn't need to remind them of what was at stake. This wasn't just about following orders, it was about protecting humanity from whatever unknown forces lurked in the shadows of the Forbidden Zone. The journey to the planet's surface was eerily quiet. The shuttle descended through thick layers of clouds, revealing a barren landscape below. The ground was cracked and dry, stretching endlessly in every direction. In the distance, jagged mountains rose like broken teeth against the horizon. It was desolate, lifeless, and utterly alien. When they landed, the team stepped out cautiously, their boots crunching against the brittle soil. The air was thin but breathable, thanks to environmental suits designed for harsh conditions. Scanners beeped softly as they swept the area, searching for any sign of the detected presence. The readings were faint but undeniable, a human signature, barely discernible amidst the background radiation. "This way," Laura said, pointing toward a cluster of rocks where the signal seemed strongest. The group moved quickly, their weapons drawn but not raised. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of the planet itself was pressing down on them. The silence around them was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their breathing and the occasional crackle of static from their comms. It didn't take long for them to find evidence of recent activity. Near the base of a rocky outcrop, they discovered footprints pressed into the dirt. Someone had been here recently, and they hadn't been alone. Scattered supplies, a torn backpack, empty ration wrappers, and a damaged handheld device lay scattered around the area. Whoever these people were, they hadn't planned to stay long, or perhaps they hadn't had the chance. Emily knelt beside the discarded items, examining them closely. "These look fresh," she said, holding up a piece of fabric. "Whoever left, them can't be far." Ryan scanned the horizon with his visor, adjusting the settings to pick up heat signatures. "I'm picking up movement," he said after a moment. "About 2 kilometers northeast could be our guy." Daniel checked the map on his wrist console. "That's heading straight toward the ruins," he muttered. His tone carried a note of unease. Everyone knew what lay in that direction. the heart of the Forbidden Zone, where the alien structures stood silent and foreboding. Laura nodded. "Let's move," she said. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." As they set off across the barren terrain, the sense of unease grew, stronger. The closer they got to the ruins, the more distorted their equipment became. Readings fluctuated wildly, and communication signals began to degrade. At one point, Emily's scanner emitted a high-pitched whine before cutting out entirely. She cursed under her breath and tapped it repeatedly, trying to reset it. "It's the zone," Ryan said grimly. "This is why they call it forbidden." They pressed on despite the growing interference, their pace quickening as they neared the source of the signal. The ruins appeared suddenly, rising out of the landscape like jagged shards of glass. Towering spires loomed overhead, their surfaces covered in strange markings that seemed to shift when viewed directly. The air around them hummed faintly, vibrating with an energy that made the hairs on their necks stand on end. At the edge of the ruins, they found him. A lone figure sat huddled by a small fire, his head bowed low. He looked up as they approached, his face gaunt and hollow-eyed. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Laura stepped forward, her weapon lowered but still ready. "Identify yourself," she demanded. The man stared at her for a long moment before speaking. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. "None of you should have come." Laura exchanged a glance with her team before turning back. To the stranger, "Who are you?" she asked. "And what are you doing in the Forbidden Zone?" The man hesitated, then sighed deeply. "My name is Alex Monroe," he said, "and I've been waiting for someone to find me, for better or worse." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The team exchanged uneasy looks. Whatever answers they sought, they had a feeling they were about to get far more than they bargained for. Document. Part 2 of the story. The fire crackled softly as Alex Monroe stared at the group, his eyes flickering between each of them. His clothes were torn and dirty, his face streaked with grime. He looked like someone who had been living rough for a long time, yet there was something unsettling about him. Something in the way he held himself, calm but distant, as if part of him wasn't entirely present. Laura crouched down to get a better look at him, her weapon still slung over her shoulder but within easy reach. "Alex," she said firmly, "start talking. Why are you here? How did you survive this long?" Alex let out a dry laugh, the sound brittle and hollow. "Survive?" he repeated, shaking his head. "Is that what you'd call it?" "I'm not sure survival is the right word anymore." His cryptic response didn't sit well with the team. Emily shifted uncomfortably, glancing around at the ruins towering above them. The strange markings on the spires seemed to pulse faintly, though whether it was real or just an illusion she couldn't tell. Ryan adjusted his scanner again, trying to make sense of the erratic readings, while Daniel kept watch, scanning the dark spaces between the structures for any sign of movement. "You're going to have to explain yourself," Laura pressed. "We don't have time for riddles." Alex sighed, leaning back against a rock. For a moment he seemed lost in thought, his gaze drifting toward the ruins. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost hesitant. "I came here years ago. Back then I was part of a research team sent to study the zone from a safe distance. But I couldn't resist. I had to see it up close." He paused, rubbing his temples as if trying to push away some painful memory. "I broke protocol. I went deeper than anyone ever should, and now I can't leave." "Can't leave?" Emily blurted out, unable to hide her skepticism. "What do you mean you can't leave?" Alex turned to her, his expression grim. "It's not just me. Everyone who comes here feels it. The pull. At first it's subtle, like a whisper you can almost ignore. But the longer you stay, the stronger it gets. It digs into your mind, feeding on your curiosity, your fears, your doubts. Before you know it, you're trapped, not by walls or chains, but by something far worse." The team exchanged uneasy glances. None of them wanted to believe him. but there was something about the way he spoke that made it hard to dismiss outright. His words carried the weight of experience, of someone who had lived through things they could barely imagine. "What exactly is doing the pulling?" Ryan asked, his tone skeptical but curious. "Are we talking about aliens? Some kind of technology left behind?" Alex shook his head slowly. "I don't think it's either. Not really. The ruins, they're alive in a way. They respond to us, to our thoughts, our emotions. I've seen them change, rearrange themselves when no one's looking. Sometimes I swear I hear voices, whispers coming from the walls. They're always asking questions, probing, testing, and the more you try to resist, the harder they push back." Daniel frowned, gripping his rifle tightly. "So you're saying these ruins are sentient? That doesn't make any sense." "It doesn't have to make sense," Alex replied sharply. "Not everything does. You'll understand soon enough if you stick around." Laura stepped forward, cutting off the conversation before it spiraled further. "Enough," she said firmly. "We're not here to debate philosophy. We need answers, and we need them fast. Do you know why we detected a human presence here? Was it you?" Alex hesitated, then nodded. "It might have been. I've been moving around a lot lately, trying to avoid certain areas. There are places in the ruins you don't want to go near, places where the Watchers are strongest." "The Watchers?" Emily echoed, her voice tinged with both fear and fascination. "What are they?" Alex's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked like he might refuse to answer. Then he sighed and gestured vaguely toward the ruins. "They're not physical beings, not like you or me. They're echoes, fragments of minds that got too close to the truth. People who stayed too long, who let their guard down. Now they're part of the zone, forever watching, forever waiting." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. No one spoke for a moment, each member of the team grappling with what they had just heard. Finally, Laura broke the silence. "All right," she said, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her gut. "We're taking you with us. If what you're saying is true, we need all the information we can get." Alex didn't argue. Instead, he stood slowly, brushing dirt off his pants. "You won't thank me for it," he muttered under his breath. "But suit yourselves." As they began to move deeper into the ruins, the atmosphere grew heavier. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe, and the faint hum of energy became a constant presence. Shadows danced along the edges of their vision, shifting unnaturally even though there was no wind. Every step seemed to echo louder than the last, bouncing off the walls and creating an eerie chorus of sound. Emily walked slightly ahead of the group, her eyes fixed on the markings etched into the stone. They were intricate, swirling patterns that seemed to twist and turn depending on how you looked at them. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against the surface, and immediately pulled back with a gasp. "What is it?" Laura asked, turning to her. I don't know," Emily stammered, staring at her hand. "It felt warm, like it was alive." Ryan moved closer, examining the wall with his scanner. The device buzzed erratically, its screen flashing, with incomprehensible data. "This place is messing with our equipment," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "We're flying blind here." "Just keep moving," Laura ordered, though her own confidence was beginning to waver. Something about the ruins unsettled her deeply, a feeling she couldn't quite put into words. It was as if the very air was pressing down on her, urging her to turn back. They continued onward, following Alex's lead. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors with surprising ease, as though he knew the layout by heart. Occasionally, he would stop and point out areas to avoid. "Don't go near that doorway," he warned once, his voice low and urgent. "Bad things happen there." Despite his guidance, the tension among the group only increased. Daniel kept glancing, over his shoulder, convinced he could hear footsteps trailing behind them. Ryan muttered curses under his breath as his scanner failed completely, forcing him to rely on instinct alone. Even Laura, usually unshakable, found herself questioning every decision they made, Then, without warning, the ground beneath their feet trembled violently. A deep rumble echoed through the ruins, growing louder with each passing second. Cracks spider-webbed across the walls, and chunks of stone tumbled down from above. "Move!" Laura shouted, pushing her team forward as debris rained around them. Alex led them into a narrow passageway just as the shaking intensified. Behind them, the corridor collapsed in a cascade of dust and rubble, sealing off their escape route. Coughing and disoriented, the group pressed on, their hearts pounding in their chests. When the tremors finally subsided, they emerged into a large chamber bathed in dim blue light. In the center of the room floated dozens of glowing orbs, suspended, midair like tiny suns. Each orb pulsed rhythmically, casting flickering shadows across the walls. What are those?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Alex stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Memories," he said simply. "Fragments of everyone who's ever come here. Their hopes, their fears, their regrets. All preserved for eternity." As the team stared in awe and horror, the orbs began to shift, aligning themselves in patterns that mirrored the markings on the walls. One by one, images flickered to life within them. Faces, scenes, moments frozen in time. Some showed explorers wandering aimlessly through the ruins, their expressions blank and vacant. Others depicted violent confrontations, people screaming, as shadowy figures closed in around them. "This is what happens," Alex said quietly. "This is what waits for anyone who stays too long." No one responded. The weight of the revelation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Whatever secrets the Forbidden Zone held, they now understood one thing clearly. Leaving wouldn't be as simple as walking away. Document Part 3 of the story. The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the glowing orbs. Each one pulsed with its own rhythm, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The team stood frozen, their eyes darting between the floating spheres and the images flickering inside them. Some showed faces frozen in terror. Others depicted scenes of people wandering aimlessly through endless corridors. It was as if the orbs were windows into the past, or perhaps the minds, of those who had come before. Emily stepped closer, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. She reached out tentatively, her fingers trembling as they hovered near one of the orbs. These are memories," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "But how is this possible? How can memories exist outside of a person's mind?" Alex didn't answer right away. He stood a few steps behind her, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and strained. "It's not just memories," he said. "It's everything. Their thoughts, their emotions, their very essence. Once you're here long enough, the ruins take it all. They strip you down until there's nothing left but echoes." Ryan frowned, scanning the room with narrowed eyes. "So what you're saying is that these people, they didn't just die. They were absorbed?" "Something like that," Alex replied, his tone bitter. "The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. You start hearing things, seeing things. At first it's subtle, just whispers or flashes of light. But then it gets worse. The Watchers pull you in deeper, feeding on your fears, your doubts. Eventually you stop fighting. You let go, and once you do, you become part of the zone." Daniel shifted uneasily, gripping his rifle tighter. "This doesn't make any sense," he muttered. "How could something like this even exist? What kind of technology, or whatever this is, could do something like this?" "It's not technology," Alex snapped, his voice rising slightly. "Not in the way you're thinking. This place isn't built. It's grown. These ruins aren't just structures, they're alive. They adapt, they learn, they change based on what they see in us. That's why no two visits are ever the same. The zone molds itself around whoever enters it." Laura stepped forward, breaking the tension. "Enough," she said firmly. "We don't have time to debate this. If what Alex says is true, then we need to find a way out, and fast. Every second we spend here puts us at risk." "But where do we go?" Emily asked, turning to face her. We're surrounded by miles of ruins, and now our exit route has collapsed. Even if we find another way out, how do we know we won't end up back here again?" "She's right," Ryan added, gesturing toward the walls. "Look at this place. It's already changing. The markings on the walls, they weren't like this before. And the corridors we came through earlier? I'm willing to bet they've shifted since we passed through them." Laura clenched her jaw, frustration bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She knew they were running out of options. The ruins were unpredictable, and every moment they stayed increased the chances of something going horribly wrong. But turning back wasn't an option either. Not anymore. "We keep moving," she said after a pause. "We'll follow Alex's lead for now. If he knows this place as well as he claims, he might be able to guide us to safety." Alex nodded reluctantly, though his expression remained grim. "Follow me," he said, stepping toward a narrow doorway at the far end of the chamber. "But stay close. Things get worse the deeper we go." The team followed him cautiously, their footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. The corridor beyond the chamber was darker than the others, the faint blue glow of the orbs fading behind them. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, twisting and writhing as though alive. The air felt heavier, pressing down on them with an almost physical weight. As they moved deeper into the ruins, strange noises began to fill the air, whispers, faint cries, and the sound of footsteps echoing from unseen sources. At first, they tried to ignore it, chalking it up to their imaginations playing tricks on them. But the sounds grew louder, more insistent, until it was impossible to dismiss them entirely. "Do you hear that?" Daniel asked suddenly, stopping in his tracks. His voice was tense, his grip on his rifle tightening. "Hear what?" Laura replied, though she already knew the answer. She could hear it too, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming against stone. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "It's coming from the walls," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pressed her hand against the surface, her eyes wide with both fear and fascination. "It feels warm, like it's breathing." Ryan pulled her back sharply, his expression hard. "Don't touch anything," he warned. "We don't know what this place will do if we provoke it." The tapping grew louder, accompanied now by low, guttural murmurs. Words began to form, indistinct at first but gradually becoming clearer. "Leave. Leave while you still can," the voices whispered, their tones pleading yet menacing. "Turn back. Turn back before it's too late." Laura raised her weapon, instinctively, sweeping the corridor ahead for any sign of movement. "Stay focused," she ordered, though her voice betrayed a hint of unease. "Whatever's talking to us, it's trying to distract us. Don't let it get inside your head." But it was easier said than done. The whispers seeped into their minds, planting seeds of doubt and fear. Emily found herself questioning whether leaving the zone was truly the best course of action. What if the answers they sought were hidden somewhere within these ruins? What if uncovering them could save humanity from some unknown threat? Ryan, meanwhile, struggled to shake off the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to shift when he looked away, every corner hiding something just out of sight. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see figures emerging from the darkness. Even Daniel, usually the most composed member of the team, felt his resolve wavering. The constant pressure of the ruins was wearing him down, making it harder to think clearly. He couldn't shake the image of the orbs and the faces trapped within them. Were they really echoes of the dead, or something else entirely? Alex led them onward, his pace quickening as the whispers grew louder. He seemed unaffected by the voices, though his knuckles were white from gripping his makeshift staff so tightly. "We're close," he muttered, more to himself than to the others. "Just a little further." Finally, they emerged into another large chamber, this one dominated by a massive structure at its center. It looked like a twisted amalgamation of stone and metal, its surface covered in the same shifting markings as the walls. In the dim light, it almost appeared organic, pulsating faintly as if drawing breath. "What is that thing?" Laura asked, her voice low but steady. Alex hesitated, his gaze fixed on the structure. That's the heart of the zone, he said quietly. The source of everything, the whispers, the watchers, the memories. If we destroy it, we might be able to escape, but doing so could also bring the entire zone crashing down on top of us. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Destroying the structure seemed like their only chance at survival, but the risks were enormous. One wrong move, and they could all end up like the others, trapped forever as fragments of themselves. We don't have a choice, Laura said finally, her tone leaving no room for argument. Set charges, we'll blow it and get out as quickly as we can. Ryan nodded, pulling a small detonator from his pack. On it, he said, moving toward the structure. As he worked, the whispers grew louder, more desperate. No, you mustn't. The voices pleaded. You don't understand. You'll unleash something far worse. But the team ignored them, focusing instead on the task at hand. They couldn't afford to hesitate, not now, not when they were so close to freedom. Document. Part 4 of the story. The detonator beeped softly as Ryan secured the last charge to the base of the structure. He wiped sweat from his brow, glancing nervously at the others. The whispers had grown louder, almost deafening now, filling the chamber with a cacophony of overlapping voices. Some pleaded for mercy, others screamed warnings that sent shivers down their spines. Done, Ryan said, stepping back quickly. His voice was barely audible over the noise. We need to move. Now. Laura nodded sharply, her eyes scanning the room. One last time. Everyone, stay close, we're getting out of here. As they turned to leave, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Chunks of stone fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing them as cracks spread across the walls. The structure in the center of the chamber pulsed brighter, its surface rippling like liquid metal. It seemed alive, reacting to their actions, fighting back against their attempt to destroy it. The zone knows what we're doing, Alex shouted, over the chaos. It's trying to stop us. No kidding, Daniel muttered, gripping his rifle tightly. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting shadowy figures to emerge from the darkness. But for now the corridor behind them remained empty. Eerily so. They ran as fast as they could, retracing their steps through the twisting passageways. The ruins groaned and shifted around them, walls rearranging themselves as if trying to block their path. At one point, a section of the ceiling collapsed directly in front of them, forcing them to take a detour down an unfamiliar hallway. This isn't the way we came, Emily cried, panic creeping into her voice. She stopped abruptly, looking around in confusion. We're lost. We're not lost, Laura snapped, though doubt flickered briefly in her eyes. Keep moving. We'll find another way out. But the further they went, the more disorienting the ruins became. The corridors twisted unnaturally, leading them in circles despite their best efforts to push forward. The glowing orbs reappeared, floating eerily along the walls, their pulsing lights casting distorted shadows on the floor. Each orb showed fragments of memories, faces screaming in terror, hands reaching out desperately, people collapsing under unseen forces. Alex slowed his pace, falling slightly behind the group. His expression was grim, his gaze fixed on the orbs. It's starting, he said quietly. The watchers are closing in. What does that mean? Emily demanded, her voice trembling. What happens when they close in? They feed on your mind, Alex replied, his tone hollow. They show you things you don't want to see, things you can't escape, and once they have you, they won't let go. Before anyone could respond, the whispers returned, louder, and more insistent than before. This time they weren't just random voices. They called out individual names, speaking directly to each member of the team. Laura. The voice was soft, almost soothing. You've always carried the weight of command. But how many lives will you sacrifice to save yourself? Laura froze, her breath catching in her throat. She shook her head fiercely, trying to block out the sound. Ignore it, she ordered, her voice strained. Don't listen. Ryan. Another voice, colder and mocking. You think you're fixing things, but all you do is break them. Your work is meaningless. You know that, don't you? Ryan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He pressed his hands to his ears, shaking his head violently. "Shut up," he shouted. "Just shut up." "Emily." A third voice, sly and persuasive. "You've spent your life chasing answers, but what if the truth is too much to bear? What if you're better off not knowing?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she stumbled forward, clutching her head. "Stop it," she cried. "Leave me alone. Daniel." The final voice was harsh, accusatory. "You pride yourself on being strong, but deep down you're afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of dying. Isn't that why you're here? To prove you're not weak?" Daniel gripped his rifle so tightly his knuckles turned white. He gritted his teeth, refusing to respond, but his hands were shaking. Alex watched silently, his face pale. "It's happening faster than I expected," he muttered. "The zone must sense how close we are to escaping. It's pulling out all the stops." Laura forced herself to focus, pushing aside the voice in her head. "We can't let it win," she said firmly. "Stick together. Don't let it divide us." The group pressed on, their movements hurried and desperate. The ruins continued to shift around them, the walls closing in until the corridors felt suffocatingly narrow. Every step felt heavier, as though the air itself was resisting them. Shadows darted at the edges of their vision, fleeting glimpses of figures that vanished when they turned to look. Finally, they reached a large chamber that looked vaguely familiar. It wasn't the same one they had entered earlier, but it shared similarities. A high ceiling, crumbling stone pillars, and faint markings glowing dimly on the walls. In the center of the room stood a massive archway, its edges lined with the same swirling patterns as the orbs. "That's it," Alex exclaimed, pointing toward the archway. "That leads outside. If we can get through there, we're free." Without hesitation, the team sprinted toward the exit. But as they approached, the archway began to shimmer, distorting the view beyond it. The image of open sky flickered, replaced by scenes of endless corridors and shadowy figures reaching out toward them. "It's not letting us leave," Emily screamed, backing away instinctively. "It's trapping us." Laura stepped forward, her weapon raised. "We're not giving up," she shouted, firing a shot at the archway. The bullet ricocheted harmlessly off the surface, sending sparks flying. Suddenly, the detonator in Ryan's hand beeped loudly, signaling that the charges were about to explode. "We're out of time," he yelled. "Get ready to run." The countdown hit 0, and the entire chamber shook violently. A deafening roar filled the air as the structure they had sabotaged imploded, sending shockwaves rippling through the ruins. The walls crumbled, the floor cracked, and the archway destabilized, its shimmering surface flickering wildly. "Now!" Laura shouted, grabbing Emily's arm and dragging her toward the archway. The others followed, their feet pounding against the unstable ground. As they passed through the archway, the world around them dissolved into chaos. For a moment, they were surrounded by blinding light and deafening noise. Then abruptly, everything went silent. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves standing on the barren surface of the planet, the ruins collapsing into rubble behind them. Dust clouds billowed into the sky as the alien structures sank, into the earth disappearing entirely. Laura took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Is everyone okay?" she asked, turning to check on her team. Ryan nodded, still holding the detonator tightly. "I think so," he said, his voice shaky. "But I don't ever want to go back there again." Emily sat down heavily on the ground, tears streaming down her face. What was that place?" she whispered. "What did we just do?" "We survived," Laura said simply, though her own hands were trembling. "That's all that matters right now." Alex stood apart from the group, staring at the ruins as they vanished completely. His expression was unreadable, but there was a sadness in his eyes that none of them could quite understand. "You sacrificed something important today," he said quietly. "Something humanity may never fully comprehend. Be careful how you use what you've learned." Before anyone could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the distance without another word. Document. Part 5 of the story. The shuttle ascended quickly, leaving the desolate surface of the planet far below. Inside, the team sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The journey back to the orbital station was quiet, the hum of the engines doing little to ease the tension that lingered among them. They had escaped the forbidden zone, but none of them felt truly safe, not after what they had seen and heard. Laura sat in the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the yaw controls despite the turmoil inside her mind. She kept glancing at the rear monitor, watching as the ruins disappeared beneath a haze of dust and debris. The mission was over, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unfinished, unresolved. The whispers were gone now, but their echoes remained, lingering in her memory like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Ryan leaned against the wall, his eyes closed, though he wasn't sleeping. His fingers tapped nervously against his knee, a habit he'd developed during stressful situations. He replayed the events of the past hours in his mind, focusing particularly on the moment he set the charges. Had they made the right decision? Destroying the structure had been their only chance at escape, but it also meant destroying whatever secrets lay hidden within the ruins. Secrets that could have changed everything, or destroyed it all. Emily sat hunched forward, her elbows resting, on her knees and her face buried in her hands. Tears streaked her cheeks, though she made no sound. Her mind raced with images from the orbs, faces frozen in terror, voices pleading for help. She had always believed in the pursuit of knowledge, but now she wondered if some truths were better, left buried. What had the zone shown her? What had it taken from her? She wasn't sure she wanted to know the answers. Daniel paced back and forth, unable to sit still. His rifle was slung across his shoulder, but his hand hovered near it constantly, as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. He glanced out the window repeatedly, scanning the empty expanse of space around them. The ruins were gone, reduced to rubble, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched. It was irrational, he knew, but the sensation was too strong to ignore. No one spoke until they docked with the orbital station. As the airlock hissed open, the team stepped out cautiously, greeted by the sterile, controlled environment of the facility. The contrast between the chaos of the Forbidden Zone and the calm of the station was jarring, almost surreal. For a moment, they simply stood there, taking it all in. Commander Hayes broke the silence first. "Debriefing room," she said firmly, gesturing for the others to follow her. "We need to report what happened." The debriefing lasted for hours. Laura recounted every detail of the mission, from the initial discovery of Alex Monroe to the destruction of the central structure. She didn't sugarcoat anything. The truth was ugly, but it needed to be told. Ryan provided technical explanations about the charges and the instability of the ruins, while Emily described the eerie nature of the orbs and the memories they contained. Daniel focused on the physical threats they encountered, though he admitted even he couldn't fully explain the strange phenomena they witnessed. When the debriefing finally ended, the team dispersed, each retreating to their quarters to process what had happened. Laura remained behind, sitting alone in the dimly lit room. She stared at the blank screen on the table in front of her, the words "Mission Complete" flashing faintly before fading away. But the sense of finality eluded her. Something about the entire experience felt incomplete, as though the Forbidden Zone still held power over them, even from afar. Hours later, as the station drifted silently through orbit, Emily found herself unable to sleep. She wandered through the corridors aimlessly, her footsteps echoing softly against the metal floors. Eventually, she ended up in the observation deck, staring out at the stars beyond the glass. The view was breathtaking, yet it offered no comfort. Her mind kept returning to the faces in the orbs, the voices calling out to her, the questions she couldn't answer. She wasn't alone for long. Ryan joined her moments later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her without speaking, then leaned against the railing beside her. Neither of them said anything at first, content to simply exist in the shared silence. "You okay?" Ryan asked finally, his voice soft but hesitant. Emily shook her head slowly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I keep thinking about those orbs, about the people trapped inside them. Do you think we did the right thing? Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know either, he said honestly, but we didn't have a choice. Staying there would have killed us, or worse. Worse, Emily echoed, her tone bitter. What could be worse than dying? Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sipped his coffee, buying himself time to think. Being turned into one of those orbs, maybe, he said eventually. Losing yourself completely, becoming just another fragment of someone else's nightmare. Emily shuddered at the thought. Do you think Alex is okay? She asked suddenly. He stayed behind once before. Do you think he'll try to go back? I hope not, Ryan replied grimly. That place, it changes people. I don't think anyone can survive it twice. They fell silent again, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside the window, the stars twinkled faintly, oblivious to the struggles of the humans gazing at them. The universe was vast and indifferent, and for the first time Emily felt small, not in a comforting way but in a terrifying one. Meanwhile, in her quarters, Laura sat at her desk, staring at a blank report form on her tablet. She hadn't written a single word. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying fragments of the mission over and over again. The whispers still haunted her, though they were softer now, almost distant. She told herself it was just stress, exhaustion catching up with her. But deep down, she knew better. As she reached for her pen, a faint noise caught her attention, a low rhythmic tapping barely audible above the hum of the station's systems. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly, she turned her head toward the source of the sound. There was nothing there, just the smooth, unbroken walls of her quarters. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the pen and began writing. Whatever doubts or fears lingered in her mind, she pushed them aside. The mission was over. The forbidden zone was gone. Humanity was safe, for now. But as she worked, the tapping returned, louder this time. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she swore she heard a whisper. You can't run forever. Laura blinked, shaking her head sharply. When she looked up again, the room was silent. The tapping had stopped. She finished the report in record time, signing off with a firm stroke of her pen. Then she stood, stretching her stiff muscles, and walked to the door. Before stepping out, she paused, glancing back at the empty room one last time. Maybe, she murmured under her breath. But we'll see how far we can get. With that, she stepped into the corridor, closing the door firmly behind her. The station hummed quietly around her, its systems running smoothly, oblivious to the storm brewing in the hearts and minds of its crew. The forbidden zone was gone, but its legacy would remain with them, and perhaps with humanity itself.